What's going on, everybody? Jesse Jordan here. If you've been watching my channel lately, you've probably been seeing me throw a crankbait a good bit. It's my absolute favorite thing to do, late fall, winter time, all the way up until the spawn. This video is all about cold water crankbaits, so let's get into it. So if you guys like content like this, drop me a comment down below and let me know if you like these tip type videos. If not, that's fine. Let me know if you hate these type of videos. I'd love to know your guys' feedback. But basically, we're going to talk about the one bait that I'm going to be throwing from now all the way until the bass go on bed next year, and that is crankbaits. There's three factors that go into picking a crankbait for me in the wintertime. One is color. Color's pretty easy for me. I'm going with a crawdad pattern. Red's my favorite. Depending on the conditions, I might go with a solid red or a see-through red or a dollar crawfish pattern. Basically, you know, if it's low light conditions, cloudy, windy, stuff like that, I'm going with the brightest colors possible. If it's super clear water, sunny day, not a lot of wind, I'm going with the, you know, more natural, clear patterns. But 9 times out of 10, I'm just going with a red or some sort of red orange. Pretty simple. Yeah, I'm not really picky about color. Two other most important factors. The second most important is depth. Knowing the depth that you're targeting, whether that be a foot, 2 foot, 3 foot deep, or all the way out to 10, 11, 12, 13 foot deep. I don't fish crankbaits much deeper than that. You know, I'm not one for deep cranking. If they're deeper in 12, 13, 14 foot, I'm probably reaching for a blade bait, you know, come cold water. And that's another thing. When it's cold water fishing, I'm either going with a crankbait, a jerkbait, a blade bait, or an Alabama rig. Maybe I might flip a jig here or there if, you know, conditions are right for it. But this video is all about cold water cranking. The most important factor to cold water cranking is figuring out the mood of the fish. A lot of times you can predict this by, you know, conditions, weather forecast, stuff like that. More times than not in the, you know, in the winter time, cold water cranking, the fish are gonna be in a negative mood. And the style of fishing, the presentation is completely different for that type of fishing. When the fish are aggressive, I am trying to cover water and I am trying to draw bites from further away. What I mean by that is the further I can get a fish to come for the bait, the further I can separate my cast, which means the more water I can cover, which means the more fish I can put my bait in front of and ultimately catch. That's what I'm trying to achieve when the fish are in an aggressive mood. I do this with basically 3 or 4 different baits. For shallow water, I'm going to reach for a Lord Jensen speed trap. This is just a square bowl. A lot of guys up here in Pennsylvania don't throw them. It's a huge thing down in the Carolinas. Everybody's seen these. The older ones are better. I have one, it's really beat up. But that thing, you can reel it as fast as you want, cover a bunch of water, has a really good vibration to it. It draws fish from a long ways away, and they just absolutely crush this thing. I throw this in that 2 to 6 foot range. This is like a little secret bait. I've never seen anybody else throw this. This is a mega bass. I think it's called a Spriganen, SM-X, I think it says on it. This is basically a mega bass wiggle wort. It has a very wide wobble. It has a really good vibration and it has a pretty good rattle to it. I really like throwing this thing in that 5 to 7 foot range when the fish are pretty aggressive. Funny story behind this is the very first time I went to Lake Norman in February, I went to a local tackle shop. Basically, I've never fished for a spotted bass before. I had really no idea what I was getting myself into. And the dude at the tackle shop's like, man, you need to have a red rock crawler. So, okay, do you sell any? He's like, no, I'm all out. I mean, everybody is buying them up like crazy. And I said to him, I said, well, do you have any red wiggle warts? Because basically a rock crawler is the Spro version of a wiggle wort. And he said, no, but I have the mega bass version of a wiggle wort. I'm like, do you have it in red? He said, yes. So I spent 20 bucks, bought this thing, tied it on, went out there the next day for an ABA, where I was a co-angler. I think there was 60 some boats in it, and I finished second. I absolutely smoked them on this thing. My boater was throwing a speed trap, and he caught a lot of fish, but I was getting my bait a little bit deeper, caught a 4-pound spot on this thing. Caught my very first spot that day. Just had an absolute blast. Finished second in the tournament. Barely missed the win. Actually, I think I lost one that day. That would have put me over the top, but that's going to happen. Yeah, that's a little story behind that bait. I brought it up home and started fishing it for smallmouth, and it's awesome. And I don't think too many guys fish it. I don't even know if Megabass still makes it. I sure hope they do. This is the only one I got, so don't steal it. And then probably the crankbait you guys been seeing me throwing a lot is a Strike King 3XD. You know, the water temp has been warm up until recently here. This bait's just my deep diving version of a, you know, aggressive. It has a really good rattle to it. It draws fish from a long ways away. Comes easy. I can fish the sucker really, really fast. Now, as the water temp drops and those fish start to get lethargic and they become pretty negative, I will switch from this bait over to a Spro rock crawler. A Spro rock crawler is by far my favorite cold water crankbait. I mean, it's probably my favorite crankbait in general. I catch so many fish on these. So basically, when I deem that the fish are pretty lethargic and in a negative mood, and they're in that 10 to 14 foot, 8 to 14 foot range, to be honest with you, I'm reaching for a rock crawler. I'm going to crank this sucker down and fish it very, very slow down there on those deep rocks, brush piles, stuff like that. The important thing to remember is when you think the fish are aggressive, it's a cast and reel, maybe a pause here and there. You're trying to draw the fish away from wherever they're living to come get your bite, and you're trying to cover water. The exact opposite is how you fish a crankbait when the fish are negative. When the fish are negative, you are really slowing down. You are picking everything apart, and you're really trying to get that bait to pause right where that fish might be. A lot of times I'll throw out there, reel the bait down, and I'm using my rod almost like pulling a Carolina rig along the rocks. And every time I feel one, I'll pause it, let that bait float a little bit. Hopefully when I feel something where I pause it, that's a piece of cover, that's where the fish is living. You're going to just suck it in. And then when you go to make your next pull, that's when you feel the mush, and that's when you set your hook and you get your bites. When they're not as deep, but they're in that mid-depth range, two of my favorite baits to throw, probably my all-time favorite, is the DT6. This is an awesome cold water crankbait. It's just an awesome crankbait year-round. But again, I'm just throwing it out there, working it really slow, pulling the bait with the rod, not the reel, letting it float up and doing it over and over and over again. Hopefully you can trick one of them big old bass to bite it. Another great crankbait a lot of guys don't throw is the Bandit 200. This is an awesome cold water crankbait, especially for smallmouth up here, around here. Same thing, pull and pause, sweep and pause with the rod. Never actually moving this crankbait with the reel, always moving it with the rod. Pick up your line, use the reel to pick up the slack, pull again. Your bites are going to come on the pause, guys. Like, it's just, I can't emphasize that enough. When the fish are negative, it's really, really about getting that bait down there to their depth, getting it around them, and then pausing it and letting it float right up to them to where they can just kind of open their mouth and eat it. And then when the fish are really, really lethargic, but yet shallow, this is like a largemouth thing I've seen up here in February when our lakes don't ice up, or maybe it's when the ice first comes off and you might get a few largemouth getting up there super shallow. You had a week of, say, 60-degree weather. That is a balsa flat side crankbait. I throw this in that 3 to 5 foot range, fishing it extremely slow. Again, throwing it out there, I might crank it down just a few feet, and then it's all about, stop and go with the rod. Sometimes I don't want the bait to even, it floats pretty slow coming up, but it does float. Sometimes I want it to float up even slower, fish it that much slower. I might take a piece of wire, wrap it around that front hook just to, I don't want the bait really to suspend. Sometimes I do have other baits for that. That's a whole nother type of fishing. It's more like jerk bait fishing. But I just want it to crank down there, get around the cover, and just stay in that strike zone for as long as possible. Sometimes to achieve that, especially with a balsa bait that has a high buoyancy, take a little piece of wire, wrap it around that front hook, and you can just get a real nice slow rise to it. That's basically my setup, is figuring out whether those fish are aggressive or are they negative. And when they're negative, which more times than not, that's going to be how I fish. Now, there are times they are so negative that even those baits don't work. And it's just to save the trip, hopefully it's like a Hail Mary type pass, I will pull out the Rapala Shad Wrap. This bait is magic. When the water's super cold, the fish are super, super negative. Sometimes throwing this sucker out there on a spinning rod with that same cast out there and sweep and pause type presentation, this thing might just save your day. Now, I've never had a day where I couldn't get bit on anything else and I pulled this sucker out and just went to wham basing them. It just don't happen. When nothing else works, it's going to be a pretty crappy day. But this bait just might save you from going home empty-handed. There have been a few days where I went out there in super cold conditions, February, March, December, where I just couldn't get a bite on anything else. Jerk baits, Alabama rigs, blade baits, crankbaits, and I pulled this sucker out and caught 2 or 3 fish. Didn't light the world on fire, but it saved the trip, prevented me from going home empty-handed. So that's the old number 5 Shad Wrap. I throw these baits, most of the time I'm throwing the deeper divers on a 7/6 medium heavy crankbait rod that I build. I throw the lighter ones, the shallower ones on a 7-foot medium heavy crankbait rod that I build. It's the same rod. I throw the Shad Wrap on a 7-foot medium action spinning rod that I use for crankbaits. So that's my setup, guys. I hope you learned something. I recently went out to the 3 Rivers and absolutely dominated throwing this red DT4. Now, when it comes to current, there's a few other factors that you have to keep in mind when it comes to cold water cranking. And I kind of saved some fish catches from that day. I didn't put them on the video that I posted a few weeks ago. I actually saved them for this video, so hopefully check them out. I do give up some, some tips on what to look for in a river when it comes to cold water cranking.
My very first tournament win I've ever had in my life, I was probably only 18 or 19 years old, was actually on this river, way upstream, about, I think it was like 3 pulls up from where we are. And we were fishing these little, I don't know if you can see it, but we were fishing these ravines where water comes through. And it creates just a little flat right here for settlement and just muck coming down from the creek. There's always these flats right here. And it was right after a rain, so there was a good bit of water running in, and all you had to do was take this little DT4, and I probably caught 50 that day and blew the tournament out. That's all I did is I just looked at the mountain. Anywhere I could see a ravine, I would just go and run from ravine to ravine to ravine. And it was a really fun day. So this side of the Lock and Dam, this building behind me, is actually a power generation station, generating electricity. They actually have the turbines running, so they're actually drawing current. In the summertime, you need that to be running current to catch a fish up here. We're actually all through the pool. This time of year, it's late October, water's 50 degrees. I don't know if they like current or not, in the colder water. The fish I caught seemed to be in more stagnant water, but you never pass up current. You still run a crankbait through that side where all that current's going through. There's one with him. Wow, that's a good one too. Man, I went to swing him in here and holy heck. So So like I was saying, the whole other side of the river has all that current. This side's all stagnant. You can see a big current right behind us, just like a pond back here. That's where he was. Another 17, 18-inch smallmouth. Let's see if I can catch his buddy. Choked it. We'll crash if I don't hurry. I figured them out now. Basically all I'm running is from rocky point to rocky point. These fish are setting up in these boulders and stuff because the boulders are gonna break the current, and then probably later in the year they'll get to the backside. Right now they're still current pushing in, so they're behind the boulders but on the front sides, because that way they're out of the current but yet they're still feeding. Now later in the year they'll probably move to the backsides and just become dormant and just sit back there and wait until it warms up in the spring. Rocky Point fish. Little one. So like I said, front side. You get these rocky points and they're on the front sides. I'll be waiting for, you know, the current to bring them food.
So I hope you guys learned something. I appreciate you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.